What happens when a CEO, the head of a successful company, decides to go undercover in his own business? What if, in the process, he uncovers a hidden truth that changes everything about the way he sees his employees? Today, we dive into a story of surprising revelations, sacrifice, and the power of human resilience. Let's take a journey through the life of David Matthews, a CEO who thought he knew everything about his company, until he found out just how far one of his employees was willing to go to survive. David Matthews was the epitome of success. As the CEO of a rapidly growing tech company, he had built an empire from the ground up. He was well known in the industry for his sharp mind, his ability to make the right decisions at the right time, and his relentless work ethic. People respected him, and many even feared him. His employees admired him, but also kept their distance. After all, he was the boss, the man at the top who seemed to have everything figured out. David had always been proud of his company, and he loved knowing that he was providing jobs and opportunities to thousands of people. But something began to gnaw at him. He couldn't shake the feeling that, despite all his success, he didn't really know his employees. He was disconnected from them, seeing them only as numbers on a spreadsheet, not as people with their own stories and struggles. One evening, after a long day of meetings, David decided to do something unexpected. He would go undercover in his own company. No one would know it was him, and he would see how his employees really lived, what they really thought about their work, and what challenges they faced on a day-to-day basis. He thought it would be an eye-opening experience, a way for him to reconnect with the heart of his business. Little did he know, what he was about to uncover would change his perspective forever. David's plan was simple. He would disguise himself as a regular employee, take on a low-level job, and see how the workers in the company interacted with each other. He wanted to see if they felt appreciated, if they were satisfied with their roles, and most importantly, if there was something deeper going on that he wasn't aware of. He chose to work in the customer support department. It seemed like a good place to start. The hours were long, and he knew that the work was often thankless. It would give him the perfect opportunity to observe. David showed up to work the next morning in a plain outfit. He wore a simple black hoodie and jeans, trying his best to blend in with the rest of the staff. He was introduced to a team of support agents, and one name stood out to him immediately: Ryan Carter. Ryan was a 28-year-old man who had been with the company for just over a year. David noticed something unusual about Ryan. Despite being relatively new, he was one of the hardest workers on the team. He was always busy, always helping his colleagues, and always staying late to finish his work. David decided to keep an eye on Ryan, thinking he might be the perfect employee to learn from. Over the course of the first week, David worked alongside Ryan, answering customer queries, handling technical issues, and generally doing everything Ryan did. But one thing became increasingly clear: Ryan was struggling, not just in his work, but in his personal life. One evening, as David and Ryan stayed late to wrap up some pending tasks, David noticed Ryan looking at his phone constantly. It wasn't just occasional checking. Ryan was looking at his phone with a sense of urgency, responding to messages and even taking calls during their shift. David couldn't help but be curious. Why was Ryan so distracted? What was so important that he couldn't focus on his work? Finally, David decided to ask, "Ryan, you've been working nonstop. You've been on your phone a lot tonight. Is everything okay?" Ryan paused, glancing at David with a look that suggested he wasn't sure whether he should open up. But after a long moment of silence, Ryan finally spoke. "It's just, I've got a lot on my plate," Ryan said quietly, not looking David in the eye. "I've got a second job and sometimes a third. It's tough, but I can manage." David was taken aback. A second and third job? How could that be possible while working full-time at a company like this? Ryan's voice faltered as he continued. "I need the extra money to pay for rent, utilities, and, well, everything else. My family needs help too, so I work whenever I can." He sighed deeply. "Some days I don't even get enough sleep." David was stunned. Here was a hardworking employee who was putting in hours and hours of work at the company, and yet he was barely able to make ends meet. Ryan wasn't just doing his job, he was living in constant exhaustion, juggling multiple jobs to support himself and his loved ones. The more David observed Ryan, the more he realized how much Ryan had been hiding from everyone. One evening after work, David decided to follow Ryan. He had to know more. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. David trailed Ryan discreetly from a distance, not wanting to be noticed. Ryan walked to a nearby diner, where he worked a second job as a waiter. David watched as Ryan greeted customers with a tired but friendly smile, rushing from table to table. After his shift ended, Ryan didn't go home. Instead, he caught a bus to a nearby factory, where he worked his third job as a night shift operator. David's heart sank as he realized what Ryan was doing. He wasn't just working 2 jobs, he was working 3, all while maintaining his full-time position at the company. Ryan's body language was telling. He was worn out, visibly drained, but he kept going. David continued to follow Ryan for the next few nights, and the truth became clearer. Ryan was putting in long, grueling hours just to stay afloat. He was barely getting any sleep, often going days without a proper break, and yet he kept pushing himself forward, day after day. After several days of observing Ryan, David knew he couldn't stay silent any longer. He felt a deep sense of guilt, realizing that he, as the CEO, had been completely oblivious to the struggles of his employees. Here was someone who had been giving his all to the company, and yet the company didn't even know the full extent of his hardships. David decided to confront Ryan. The next day, after their shift ended, he pulled Ryan aside. "Ryan," David said, his voice sincere, "I've been watching you, and I need to know, why are you doing all of this? Why are you working 3 jobs and still pushing yourself so hard here?" Ryan looked down, his face flushed with embarrassment. I didn't want anyone to know," he said quietly. "I didn't want to burden anyone with my problems, but I'm just trying to make sure I can take care of my family, my bills. I'm doing what I have to do." David felt a wave of guilt wash over him. He had been living in a bubble, unaware of what his employees were going through. And here was Ryan, someone who had been working harder than anyone else, yet struggling to survive. "I'm so sorry, Ryan," David said, his voice full of regret. "You shouldn't have to live like this. No one should." From that moment on, David knew he had to do something. He immediately called an emergency meeting with the company's board and senior management team. He shared Ryan's story with them, and everyone was shocked. They had no idea that one of their most dedicated employees was going through such hardship. The company decided to take immediate action. They started offering financial assistance programs, improved work-life balance policies, and gave employees the chance to take paid time off for mental health and personal issues. For Ryan, they offered a generous raise and a more flexible work schedule, ensuring that he wouldn't have to sacrifice his health or happiness to survive. David personally made sure that Ryan's situation improved, and he went out of his way to help Ryan's family with housing and financial support. Ryan was stunned by the kindness and generosity, and he felt a sense of relief he hadn't felt in years. From that day on, David Matthews became a different kind of CEO. He realized that success wasn't just about profits and numbers. It was about the people who made the company what it was. Ryan's story opened his eyes to the struggles many employees face, and he became committed to making sure no one else would have to go through the same thing. The experience taught him a valuable lesson. The most powerful companies aren't just those that make the most money. They're the ones that take care of their people. And for Ryan, that was the beginning of a new chapter in his life, a chapter where he could finally rest, knowing that he was no longer alone in his struggle. That's the story, friends. I hope you enjoyed it. It was a pleasure sharing it with you all. Don't forget to comment below and let me know where you're watching from. It's always fun to see the global reach of these stories. And if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button for more amazing stories, tips, and tricks. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. If you'd like to show some extra love, tap the three dots near the share button and send a super thanks.